Can you guys hear my fan, my AC, my window fan?
Yeah.
Because I can mute myself.
Nope. Don't hear it.
Hi, everyone. I figure as we're pouring in, we can do our classic introductions if folks are feeling like it. We can just do names, pronouns, where we're calling in from, and what we're working on tonight. So we'll just do popcorn style, whoever feels like introducing themselves. I can start. I'm Maya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling in from Arlington, Vermont, and I am currently working on a bag for my friend that I'm knitting. And yeah, I'm excited for tonight.
I'm Ryan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm also coming in from Arlington, Vermont. Today I accidentally spilled some coffee, I think, on the bag Maya's making. But I think we'll be able to get out. I'll also be reading tonight.
Hi, I'm Jen. But
Okay.
we can go with Cindy first.
Okay, I'm Cindy. I go with she, her pronouns, and I'm in West Covina, California. And I'm currently working on, this little onion. Yeah, that's all. All right, go ahead, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen, and I use she, her, and I'm calling in from Studio City. And I am working on 2 embroideries because one wasn't enough. So I'm working on flowers for this one, and I just started the mallow, literally last night. I've probably maybe like 3 stitches in it, so it's really new.
Hi, I'm Joan in North Hollywood, she, her. Still making very slow progress on the oyster mushrooms. And
Pretty.
hi, thank you. I could read if you're going to need another reader, as I was able to find the material.
I wanted you to cut this.
Thank you, Joan. Yeah, for anyone who feels like reading with us tonight, we would love to have you. Joan, absolutely, we love having you read with us. It's like you're one of my favorite people to listen to read, actually. So it's a pleasure to have you.
Hi, I'm Millie. I'm at a project of Metabolic Studios named The Moon. Today we will be harvesting tomatoes, squashes, but primarily corn. And I'm super happy to be doing that while I'm listening to you guys. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Armand, he, him, and I'm very excited to be here. Good to see everybody.
Hello, I'm Caroline, and I'm calling from Studio City, pronouns she, her, and I'm still working on my little beggar stick. Happy to be here tonight, thank you.
Hi, I'm Rowena Koenig. I'm calling from Los Angeles, and I'm working on the Prince mushroom. I think, Joan, you said the oyster mushroom was going slow. I'm also finding that there's a lot of surface area, but it's very soothing and meditative. Nice to be here.
Hello? Can you hear me? I'm Christine, and I don't know what mine is, but it's feral. This is my embroidery. So.
Ooh, wow. Keep it up there for a second, Christine.
Yeah, nice.
Can you see?
Wild thing.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Love all those textures. Thanks for
Great.
sharing. Good to see you, Chrissy.
Lovely to see you, Miss Meyer. I've been on other ones, but somehow when I've tried to say hello, it hasn't recognised me or something.
Oh,
How are you? How are you? Wherever you are.
we're good. It's beautiful here. You know, we're in Vermont for everyone who's
Mhm.
curious. It's like so amazing and beautiful. Isolating, but you know, everything's isolating right now. So
Are you making music?
we haven't actually been working on music because everything's just been we've been so busy, but we plan once the weather starts to cool off to start recording again. I'm really excited about that time.
And did you, like, how long did it take you to get all this course reading together?
It took me about a week to
good.
just get the research and kind of compile. I didn't come up with like a lesson plan for each thing. I just compiled the readings that I thought we should do. Yeah.
That is great. You could teach it as a course, Maya.
Thank you. I think part of the beauty of this is like the reading's there. We're just reading it out loud together, and it feels like I'm learning so much from what everyone's sharing too. So for folks who are just coming in, we're just going around and introducing ourselves, and we're going to do this for 3 more minutes, and then at 8:40 we're going to start the readings.
Actually, Maya, I have a question. Could
Yeah.
you please send the whole reading list? I thought I'd copied it, but I can't find it at the moment.
Yep, I can send that. I'll put that on the chat.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I'm going to do our introduction. Oh, did you want to do it?
I can.
Yay, Ryan is feeling up to doing the introduction.
I'm going to get behind the wheel of the introduction tonight. So, where is it?
Here you go.
Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Abolitionist Reading and Native Plant Embroidery Zoom gathering hosted by the Metabolic Studio. Just want to give a brief intro and give a little bit of context about what we're doing here. So the Metabolic Studio is located in downtown LA and is the practice of the artist Lauren Bond. Since 2016, Lauren has been conducting a community evening and potluck on Thursday nights, which began right after the last presidential election. When it became necessary for us to come together and create a space to voice what was going on in our communities and how we were all being impacted by the current administration. The Thursday evenings always started with a potluck and included message making and our printmaking workshop. The practice of coming together once a week has also included many handcrafts with community members, working with clay, weaving, and embroidering. Since the pandemic hit, we've stopped gathering in person and have moved to the Zoom platform. A short overview regarding the embroidery. Many of you here have already received embroidery kits in the mail, and for those of you who are interested in receiving a kit, please email Jen Curtis from the Metabolic team, and we will mail a kit to you. In the kit is a line drawing on fabric of a botanical plant which is part of the food and medicine that the Metabolic Studio is currently growing on 2 studio sites along the LA River. We are also growing food and medicine up in Paihunadu, so-called Owens Valley, where Los Angeles steals its water from. And wait, hold on, I messed that up.
You're good.
Well, sorry, where Los Angeles steals its water from, and we're also working here in Vermont as an effort to give away free food to folks in need right now. We drew images of the plants we're growing, transferred the drawings onto fabric, which we sent to you, along with an embroidery hoop, needles, and thread. In the kit, you also should have received a self-addressed return envelope with postage. When you have finished your embroidery, you can use this to mail it back to the Metabolic Studio. These embroideries will be made into a hybrid object connecting the readings and the embroideries together. This space is intended to provide a time for us all to be together when we cannot physically be together, and to create an opportunity for us to talk and exchange ideas while using our hands to craft. A week after we hosted our initial embroidery circle, the world changed. The witnessing of the murder of George Floyd broadcasted across the globe in the midst of a global pandemic. Metabolic collectively decided to turn our focus on educating ourselves and our community about systemic racism. This gathering is specifically focused on prison and police abolition, a topic that has decades of literature for us to dive into. How can we do better? How can we become active accomplices in the movement for Black lives? One way is to hold space for reading and discussion that can help provide the fertile soil for a vibrant future where we all can thrive. Tonight, we'll be reading We're in It for the Long Haul, Alternatives to Incarceration for Youth in Conflict with the Law by Mariam Kaba and Michelle Venata, written in 2013. And we can put a link to it in the chat. And if any of y'all want to read along with us, you're very welcome to. We can just pass off. There isn't any content warnings or anything in this reading. And
we are dividing the reading up because it's a long one. So we had to cut some descriptions of some of the specific organizations. And for those who will be reading out loud with us, I'll just interject if those pages come along. And I do want to just say one correction, which is Miriam Kaba.
Kaba.
That's how she pronounces her name. So I'm gonna ask for those of you who would like to read with us tonight, would you please, I know Joan, you would love to do that, which is great. And if anyone else would like to, please go ahead and unmute yourself and just let us know so that we can pass it off to you.
I can do some reading if you like.
Thank you, that would be awesome.
Is it here in the resource?
I put it in the chat, the link to the reading.
Okay. Do I have to download something?
You shouldn't have to.
I don't believe so. Let me.
We're in it for a long haul.
Oh, yeah. You click download via IssueLab,
Yeah.
but it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, cool.
All right. All right. Got it.
Great. So I'll start and then I'll pass it to Ryan. And then Ryan, you can pass it to Shakura. And then Shakura, you can pass it to Joan. And then Joan, you can pass it back to me.
Before we start reading, though, we have a question for us all to kind of have in our minds while the reading is going on. And that question is, what are some ways that these alternatives to incarceration have the potential to reshape how we perceive public safety? And I'm going to just throw that in the chat right now as well. If you want to take a look at it, we can talk about it later. All right.
A young man burglarizes the home of a police officer in Englewood, stealing a laptop. The officer is upset and frustrated, perceiving the young man as nothing more than a thug. Precious Blood Ministries staff is able to bring the young man, his mother, and the officer together in a peace circle. Everyone discusses what happened and its impact. The officer speaks to the young man about how the burglary hurt him, not just through losing an important possession, but especially because it affects him as a father. His son is now saying he no longer wants to live in the neighborhood, and the officer worries he's not providing adequately for his own child. The mother of the youth who committed the offense also speaks of the stress and pain the situation has created for her. The youth is able to express his own experiences growing up in the challenging neighborhood without adequate resources and experiencing struggles at school. The officer also grew up in Englewood and is able to begin to connect with the youth who had broken into his home. The young man is able to recognize how his actions hurt the family he burglarized and also hurt his own mother. He apologizes many times, and when the circle facilitator asks the officer what he needs to recover from the harm done to him, the policeman states that he has everything he needs, but that he wants to see the young man go to school. The officer also mentions that he's a coach. He offers to play ball with the young man, who joins him. Father Kelly, a staff person from Precious Blood Ministries, notes that this outcome could not be reached through a court process that focuses on assessing culpability and meting out punishment by sending the youth to detention. Father Kelly believes the accountability process of a true restorative justice circle can lead to lasting positive changes for all parties, as well as building community connections. The crisis of youth incarceration. There is an urgent need to find constructive ways to respond to young people in conflict with the law. Research compellingly demonstrates that youth placed in juvenile detention centers, compared to alternative interventions, are much more likely to later spend significant time in prison. Juvenile and adult incarceration both create exorbitant financial and social costs. Incarceration of juveniles is harmful to young people's development, education, families, communities, and their current and future socioeconomic status. Furthermore, incarcerating youth is not effective at enhancing public safety. Conditions of detention, even when monitored and regulated, often involve serious violations of human rights, such as solitary confinement and sexual violence perpetrated by staff. These abuses harm youth's physical health, mental health, and social well-being. Destructive conditions that create lasting damage are even more extreme for youth confined to adult jails and prisons. The detention process disconnects youth from family and supportive relationships, interrupts education, and makes it difficult for youth to get adequate exercise, healthcare, nutrition, and support. Incarceration is extravagantly expensive. In 2012, Illinois taxpayers paid an average of $86,861 per year for each youth incarcerated in state prison. Taxpayers paid an astounding $219,000 per year for each youth confined to the Cook County Juvenile Temporary Detention Center. These numbers do not include associated costs, such as government monies used to pay police, investigators, prosecutors, public defenders, judges, court personnel, and others for the arrest, investigation, and adjudication of youth's criminal cases. Illinois and the rest of the United States has made a staggering investment of the criminalization of youth.
Incarceration is traumatic for youth, as evidenced by young people's suicides, suicide attempts, self-harm, and the worsening of mental health symptoms while inside. The stigma of incarceration follows youth for a lifetime, interfering with education, housing, jobs, economic well-being, and stable community relationships. Disproportionate arrest, prosecution, conviction, and sentencing of youth of color perpetuate and intensify racist injustice throughout the United States. Incarceration can be particularly horrific for gender non-conforming youth who may be assigned to facilities on the basis of physical examinations or identification documents rather than based on the youth's own gender identity and presentation. Thus, someone who lives in the world as a young woman may be incarcerated at a men's prison. This exposes the youth to significant danger and trauma. Finally, there is no conclusive evidence that incarceration in juvenile detention centers safeguards our communities, improves pro-social behavior among those currently or formerly incarcerated, or rehabilitates youth who have engaged in harmful behavior. Because incarceration is expensive, traumatic, disruptive, and ineffective, exploring alternative strategies for working with youth in conflict with the law offers rich opportunities to promote community well-being while saving money. Carefully implemented alternatives to detention, incarceration, reduce harm in communities, promote youth development, contain costs, enhance safety protocol, human rights, and builds a stronger society. Conservative, moderate, and progressive political forces can easily unify around the idea of less expensive, more effective ways to build young people's capacity, hold youth accountable for their behavior, and promote individual and community well-being. Alternatives to incarceration can deliver all of this and help meet the individual needs of youth. This paper describes a number of programs in Chicago that provide alternatives to incarceration for young people charged with or convicted of crimes. Included in this exploration are issues of cost, effectiveness, capacity, and the needs of youth and organizations moving forward. In reality, the idea of such programs is not truly alternative, but already embedded in our current criminal legal system through the mandates of the Illinois Juvenile Court Act itself, as explored in the next section. Legal mandate for alternatives to incarceration and detention of children and youth. The Illinois Juvenile Court Act specifically mandates that the juvenile justice system promotes the development and implementation of community-based programs designed to prevent unlawful and delinquent behavior and to effectively minimize the depth of the duration of the minor's involvement in the juvenile justice system. The Act further tasks the system to provide programs and services that are community-based, that are in close proximity to the minor's home, and to allow minors to reside within their homes whenever possible and appropriate, and provide support necessary to make this possible. Capacitation and rehabilitation without incarceration of youth convicted of crimes is not actually an alternative form of delivering justice. The Illinois legal system mandates that this be the heart of our juvenile justice programming. Cliff Nellis, an attorney for the Lawndale Christian Legal Center, explained that the Juvenile Court Act mandates that in the sentencing of a youth, quote, by statute, you have to do an individualized assessment. You have to always, when possible, place them in the home with their parents and siblings, able to continue building relationships with school teachers. This is required of judges, state's attorneys, and the probation department, and every defense attorney should be advocating for this. Then the community and the state must put forth resources to have community-based alternatives, because you can't carry out the law if there are no programs to put your kid into, end quote. Nellis clarifies that the juvenile courts are required to sentence youth in the least restrictive of all reasonable alternatives. In order to confine a youth in the Department of Juvenile Justice, the state's attorney or probation department must demonstrate to the judge that all efforts have been made to place a youth with a community-based program, and that only if a community program is not viable may incarceration be considered. What alternatives to detention? Shakora, do you want to take over right there? It's on page 5.
Oh, I think you have to unmute.
You're muted right now. There you go.
All right. There are many different ways to conceptualize and define alternatives to incarceration. A robust consideration of the concept must go beyond imposing new forms of punishment, confinement, and surveillance. In addition, there are numerous programs that provide support to youth that one might think of as preventing incarceration and detention. These include excellent education, after-school programs, sports, youth job programs, training programs, camps, and anything that provides young people with resources to learn, grow, develop mastery, meet basic needs, build positive relationships, and find ways to share and contribute in their community. These programs are too numerous to count and abound in particular in wealthy, well-sourced communities offering abundant opportunity for learning, self-expression, connection, and recreation. Access to money, resources, recreation spaces, positive programs, and schools focused on providing youth with positive options, along with low levels of police surveillance, leads to low levels of criminalization and incarceration in wealthy neighborhoods. While we advocate providing such resources to all communities, this report does not examine all the types of programming and neighborhood characteristics that lead to healthy outcome for youth. Instead, we are describing programs that work with youth who don't receive adequate resources or assistance from government, communities, schools, families, neighborhoods, programs, or religious institutions, and thus become involved in conflicts with the law. For this paper, quote, alternatives to incarceration, end quote, refers to programming which takes the place of detention for youth, either after arrest and before trial, or after conviction and sentencing. This program may be considered an alternative if the youth would be incarcerated at the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center or the Illinois Youth Center if not for participating in this program. The programs we considered also generally work with young people intensively enough that they can actually make a long-term difference in the youth's lives. During the interviews, program staff identified some of the key elements of a true alternative to incarceration in this spirit, mentioning that an optional alternative to incarceration is community-based and connects youth to the community. Instead of coming from outside institutions, a good alternative to incarceration builds relationships and a sense of safety and connection within the community. Without this, a program can serve more as an extension of carceral systems into the community rather than a true alternative that provides long-term benefits for youth. Alternatives in Chicago. There are already a number of programs in place in Chicago that serve as excellent alternatives to incarceration for youth. The organizations running these programs deserve recognition and need support to continue and expand their crucial work. This paper documents some of these effective and innovative programs which can serve as models for future programming. The report also takes inventory of some of the key needs identified by program staff and the youth. We give brief overviews of 5 model programs with different capacities and structures. Each has its own effective practices for helping youth gain the resources to grow into positive adults. The programs included in the report are Precious Blood Ministries, Lawndale Christian Legal Center, Youth Outreach Services, Circles and Ciphers, and New Life Centers of Chicagoland. There are other programs in Chicago that provide alternatives to incarceration for youth, such as programs within the Cook County Probation Department, whose programs are briefly described in the appendix, New Beginnings Church, and Youth Advocate programs. Unfortunately, we were unable to reach staff of these organizations to conduct detailed interviews, but it's important to note that the work going on in the city spans beyond the programs detailed here. The report will give brief profiles of each of the 5 programs and then summarize the needs and recommendations identified. Precious Blood Ministries. Father Kelly described this program's innovative work in Back of the Oz.
Sorry to cut you off. This is the part we're going to...
You're going to cut it out?
Because I think it's important for all of us to read this from when we can to learn about the specific work each group is doing. But just to summarize for everyone, essentially each group is looking at ways they can create a more, profound and more deep learning activities in life to get out of just feeling like stuck in this system for youth instead of just incarcerating them. There are like specific programs that they're doing to hold space for them to have like places to go on a Friday night and learn and discuss and have connections that aren't just like through incarceration essentially. So we're gonna go to page 13.
13?
Yeah, we're gonna start at needs of youth and of programs.
Okay, want me to continue?
Yes, please continue. Thank you.
Needs of youth and of programs. During the interviews, program staff identify some of the key needs that their youth are facing, along with what organizations need to serve youth effectively. The young people sometimes have overwhelming needs because of the grossly unequal distribution of resources within U.S. society. To function optionally, programs need access to adequate funding, staff, and physical resources such as space and equipment. The specifics are detailed below. First, staff were able to identify some of the main needs that youth had expressed to them. The most central necessities the youth lack include housing, money for basics such as food and transportation, and jobs to be able to provide for themselves. Staff also noted that youth came to them seeking assistance to obtain identification, appropriate clothing for interviews, help with resumes and job applications, and bail money. Youth also requested aid in resolving conflicts, opportunities to engage in expressive arts, and a chance to record and distribute music, poetry, and spoken word compositions. Finally, young people sought chances to publicly share perspectives and personal stories to communicate their experiences and contribute to positive social change. Staff of the program also identified a number of issues that they would believe were prominent among the youth. Program staff felt that the young people were frequently in need of safe spaces in their communities, job training, structured social activities, and an opportunity to take responsibility and build a sense of mastery. Staff also felt their youth need mentorship, positive expectations from others, positive connections with others, space to talk about what is most important for them, tools for healthy relationships, and sometimes father figures or male role models. Programs that were attentive to legal issues noted that youth needed help to get fair bonds and also to make good decisions about fighting a case instead of taking a plea. Cliff Nellis noted that youth commonly take plea bargains in cases that might have better outcomes at trial. Defendants are often unaware of the negative long-term consequences of their plea deals. Other issues raised by youth were that youth and their families often had problems navigating the public school system and were sometimes dealing with inadequate schools, which do not keep students up to grade level. Some youth were facing mental health issues or learning disabilities. When these issues were improperly identified or treated, mental health and learning issues led to truancy and behavior problems. Schools responded with suspension or expulsion. Some students had been inappropriately labeled with mental health or learning issues when they actually had other problems. Once students have been negatively labeled and expelled, schools were often unwilling to accept them back. Some staff noted that many of the youth need mental health services, and currently available mental health resources have not always worked out well. In addition, mental health clinics in many poor neighborhoods of Chicago have been closed down. Some staff mentioned the need for clinical practitioners who truly understand the youth's social context and lived experience, and practitioners who can relate effectively to young people with significant mental health needs. It is preferable for youth to work with experienced practitioners with whom they can build long-term relationships rather than interns who are newly learning clinical skills and will only be available for short periods of time. Yet, clients with some of the most intense trauma and complicated needs are sent to clinics to work with a series of temporary, unpaid interns who have not yet even earned a clinical license. Some youth need crisis intervention for themselves and their families. Many face unstable home and family lives. Staff spoke of youth moving between the homes of mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and friends because of conflicts and resource issues. These unstable housing situations led to particular hardships for youth on parole or electronic monitoring, as it could become literally impossible for them to comply with the criminal legal system's demands. Youth sometimes have difficulty staying in adequate communication with probation officers due to the youth's own situation, or because of difficulty getting a response with the listed department phone numbers. Sometimes young people are not able to be in the location where the officer expects, and so the youth gets violated. Youth on electronic monitoring sometimes have problems communicating with officers and may have their probation violated when they leave the house for legitimate reason, but without obtaining permission. Can someone pick it up?
On page 15.
Joan, you.
Page 15. Some of the staff had different.
Yes, yes, I can.
Thanks,
Okay.
Great.
Let's see, back. Just one moment. Navigating pages, okay. Some of the staff had different perspectives around drug issues. While Youth Outreach Services staff found that many of the youth who come to ERCs with cases have issues with substance abuse, Lawndale Christian Legal Center found that most of their clients, while often perceived to have substance issues, in reality were more often involved in drug cases because they were engaged in the underground economy, selling drugs to get money for survival. The center also focused on helping young people understand the root causes of substance issues. They explained that in time and with patience, this usually comes down to a young person grappling with experiences of racism. Smoking marijuana and drinking represents attempts to escape, to numb oneself to experiences of oppression. Program staff also listed out some of the key needs that their organizations had in order to be able to best serve the youth. These included sufficient and stable funding, more staff, reliable and skilled volunteer or paid mentors, safe spaces and green spaces in communities, effective and accessible family therapy and resources to help families reduce stress, case management resources, sustainable long-term jobs programs, and funding to pay staff who can stay long-term, especially staff who live in the community and can build long-term relationships and create trust. A significant need mentioned was money for safe passage, specifically helping youth navigate passing through rival gang territories or being able to bring programming directly to youth. Heidi Mueller, formerly of Youth Outreach Services, noted that her program specifically needed resources to engage youth in healthy, safe, pro-social activities, particularly activities that build social skills. Many communities have few resources, and the neighborhood doesn't offer many youth-oriented activities. Once young people are on probation, their options are even more limited, and they often can't participate in sports. YOS mentioned the serious need for money for recreational activities, money for more licensed foster homes, money for transporting youth, and money for emergency housing assistance. She also commented that the program needs models that are specifically designed for Cook County populations and translated into Spanish. At one point, YOS tried to use a model from social workers in another state, but that didn't work for all. Didn't work at all for the Chicago population.
All right, cut you off there, Joan, because this next section is about the costs, and it's a lot of numbers.
Okay.
That are kind of, I think, maybe not super helpful to be read out loud because it might, at least for me as a listener, it's like just too many numbers to digest. So for folks who are interested in their costs that they have, this study is accessible and we have it in the chat bar, so please do look into it. But Joan, we're going to continue on the end of page 16 at program effectiveness.
Okay, got it. Program effectiveness. The programs each have somewhat different ways of evaluating their work and measuring their successes. Although all interviewees mentioned that assessment of their work can be a challenge. Several mentioned that funders sometimes use evaluation methods that do not give an accurate picture of the work and its meaning. Many youth in resource-starved neighborhoods in Chicago are currently dying from acts of violence. Precious Blood Ministries demonstrates its success in many ways, yet Father Kelly says that sometimes he simply defines success as keeping kids alive. The neighborhood where Precious Blood works faces many extreme challenges and hardships, and youth confront multiple forms of institutional and interpersonal violence. Young people who are part of a social support system and have access to material resources in the form of reliable shelter, food, and emergency funds are more likely simply to survive. Circles and Ciphers focuses on the goal of nurturing leadership capacity and community engagement among young people who are dispossessed, providing tools and experiences so that they can build healthy relationships. Circles and Ciphers assesses the impact of their programming in terms of improved future orientation and cultivation of alternative images of manhood and critical consciousness among participants. They are currently developing an assessment methodology that will allow them to more accurately measure how young people engaged in the Circles and Ciphers pedagogy experience a shift in personal values as they actively work to transform their personal and community legacies and forge new conceptions of identity by making different choices. That was a really long sentence. I'm sorry, I'm going to read it again. Circles and Ciphers are currently developing an assessment methodology that will allow them to more accurately measure how young people engaged in the Circles and Ciphers pedagogy experience a shift in personal values as they actively work to transform their personal and community legacies and forge new conceptions of identity by making different choices. Circles and Ciphers is training youth as researchers to collaborate in the development of these measures and methodologies. For New Life Center's Urban Life Skills Program, success means being faithful to their own mission and to the youth, rather than simply assessing their work based on the number of youth they have served or whether youth have gotten involved in new criminal cases during the time they've worked together. New Life considers many factors in judging their own performance. They ask themselves if they have truly given youth every chance and shown up when no one else does, if they have walked alongside the youth during probation, if they have talked to the youth about breaking free from gang lifestyle and addictions to drugs, if they have addressed the meaning of true family, and if they have stayed connected to the youth for at least a year. If the young person made progress in one of these areas during that year, this would be success. New Life would like to be able to count having a job as success, but the program can't even touch some of the barriers to employment that the youth face, so it would not make sense to measure the success of New Life by that metric. Matt DiMatteo notes, quote, "We are an alternative to detention because the kids would be locked up if they weren't placed in our program. Findings show that shootings are down on Mondays and Thursdays when we have our summer softball league. And so guys that could have been out there because there are no other resources, no places to play, could have been out there, caught a gun case, been locked up and dragged into the system. Can we ever measure those numbers? No. But we will keep doing the work because we need as many resources and as many alternatives to the gang lifestyle as possible," close quote. New Life actively tracks a variety of different factors, including recidivism, connecting to a caring adult, substance abuse, and more. New Life has a no recidivism success rate of close to 75%, as measured by youth not violating probation or picking up a new case. This is almost double the national average. Lawndale Christian Legal Center tracks many outcomes for its youth, including legal outcomes, school attendance, grades, recidivism, rearrest, violation of probation, and whether a youth is found guilty at rearrest. Many of the youth have success measured by meeting learning goals through the mentoring programs, graduating from school, and avoiding rearrest. The LCLC also graduates few youth based on extremely high standards. Graduates are youth who have stayed very connected to the program and not been rearrested. This year, the program graduated 1 youth. Last year, they graduated 2. The standards for graduation are set so stringently because graduates become role models for others. With YOS, about 75% of the youth in the program for adolescent domestic battery have successful outcomes. YOS considers the program a success when youth are able to achieve a stable living arrangement and meet goals they establish together with the program staff. Each of the programs profiled here is engaged in different ways in crucial work to build positive, stable futures for youth. They each define success in their own way, depending on their orientation and mission. All programs struggle with the structural barriers in the neighborhoods in which they operate, and yet they have all achieved many successes with their youth despite those constraints. At the end of a section. Can I pass it on to someone?
The stories of the young people. The stories of young people involved in these programs are poignant, sometimes triumphant, and sometimes tragic. These complex young lives never fit into simple stereotypes endemic to U.S. society about who, quote, at-risk youth, end quote, are and how they behave. During the interviews, some program staff shared stories of young people they had worked with. Names and identifying details have been charged for confidentiality, and the identity of the storyteller is not included. One program interviewee spoke of a young man who had been part of the program for some time. The staff received a collect call. The youth on the phone had just been in touch with the program the week before, excited about a new job he was about to start. Together, the staff and the young person had prepared the job application, set up a mock interview, and worked on a resume. The young man had been hopeful and positive, but during this call, he was in a state of crisis, crying and in extreme distress. He had been locked up and was calling from Cook County Jail. In the mass media, we typically hear of youth who inevitably fall, quote, back into a life of crime, end quote. But this young man was not in jail for lapsing into a criminal lifestyles in quotes there, involving drugs, violence, stealing, or even hanging out with others involved in lawbreaking. His quote-unquote crime, riding his bicycle on the sidewalk in his own neighborhood. This is an activity that many Chicagoans, including one of these authors, frequently engage in, since riding on the streets can be life-threatening. But this author, a white woman, has never been stopped by police in her 20 years in Chicago. The youth in question, however, was stopped by 2 police officers. This was the day where he found out that he had gotten the job. The 2 days before he was supposed to start work, the police handcuffed and arrested the young man for riding on the sidewalk. They took him to the police station, and as the young man sat there handcuffed, an officer alleges that the youth kicked him in the shin, while the officer said that he required no medical attention due to the alleged kick. The police then charged the youth with felony aggravated assault and kept him in jail for some time. Riding a bicycle on the sidewalk in Chicago is not even a misdemeanor, but in fact a, quote, petty offense, end quote. Yet the police chose to arrest and cuff the youth and take him into the police station in this case. Such events can create a negative spiral for a young person. This youth missed his first 2 weeks at his new job, and if convicted of the charges against him, he could be labeled for life as a felon, leading to serious restrictions in eligibility for employment, educational loans, public housing, and other forms of public aid, as well as the custody or adoption of children. It might also affect their right to vote. I'm not sure about it in Illinois. If he had been undocumented, the conviction would be grounds for expedited deportation. In some states, felony convictions can lead to a permanent loss of voting rights. There we go. In all states, felony convictions are associated with significant long-term stigma and marginalization. Because of support from the Chicago program, the youth was able to get assistance with bail money and legal advice. He was able to get out of jail after only a brief incarceration to await the deposition of his case, which is still in the process. This story illustrates why youth may feel hopeless about being able to avoid involvement with the criminal legal system, no matter how hard young people try. This also shows how crucial financial, social, and legal supporters are for youth in communities that have high density and intensity of police surveillance. In another case, a staff member from a different program spoke of a young person whose history of trauma interfered with his otherwise significant progress in building a positive life for himself. At the time of the interview, the youth was being held at Cook County Jail. He had made some unwise decisions, but the staff noted, quote, "He is trying as hard as anybody. I know to turn things around." Sorry, I'll start that over. Quote, "He is trying as hard as anybody. I know to turn things around. And so, in some sense, I think it's wholly unfair and unjust that he's here, that he's there. This kid has been trying, and some things that he couldn't really sorry, this is confusing. This kid has been trying, and some things that he couldn't really control have contributed to him being in custody. He had a full-time job, was in full-time college, lost his job, got kicked out of his school, and is on academic probation because of a couple bumps in the road. Either he dropped dirty for marijuana, missed a probation meeting, or just little things here and there. In my opinion, the thing he would need the most is some kind of assistance with what I assume is some kind of trauma or wound that he hasn't healed from, because we've all been able to see it. He's this great kid with all kinds of potential, smart, articulate, and then something will happen, and he gets triggered. He just switches to swearing and wanting to throw in the towel and give up. It's pretty easy to wind up in jail, especially when on probation or parole." End quote. This case shows again how carefully youth must tread and how lack of adequate services and supports can increase the risk of incarceration. I'm going to pass it to Maya.
Another staff person spoke of a positive outcome due to program intervention. A youth assaulted a teacher, and the teacher, although not physically hurt, had emotional distress. The staff brought them together in circle, and the teacher explained the impact of the attack to the young person, who apologized. The dean of students and a couple of other teachers also attended. The criminal legal system was bypassed altogether, and the harm was repaired. Another program spoke of a young person who was a model youth with the program. The young man stopped using drugs, came to all the meetings, and was successful with the program. The program wanted to help him find a job and create stability in his life, but he was undocumented. The new DREAM Act is not accessible for many youth because it excludes those with criminal records. It is particularly damaging for undocumented youth to be convicted of a crime, as this can consign them to rapid deportation to a country where they may have no family, no language ability, and no survival skills. If they escape immediate deportation, a criminal conviction might lead to permanent life in the shadows with relentless and eternal risk of deportation and separation from their families, loved ones, and sometimes the only country where they can remember living. The ability of undocumented youth to support themselves and family members through regular jobs is severely limited by the current immigration regulations. Job programs for youth are unable to address these structural barriers to earning wages outside of street economies. These stories remind us of the wide variety of structural barriers confronting youth and preventing them from attending school, meeting their basic needs, finding living wage work, and avoiding contact with the criminal legal system. Programs that reduce the harmful impact of the criminal legal system on youth's lives can make the difference between a life permanently in the shadow of the racist carceral state and a life of productive engagement with community and family. A plan for moving forward. And I also wanted to mention that this study has a lot of beautiful graphics on it and art pieces. So again, the link is in the chat for folks who want to read the full study and to look at these visuals. A plan for moving forward. Throughout interviews, we hear from staff and from the stories of youth the desperate need for stable funding for alternatives to incarceration and for youth job programs. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm gonna interrupt one more time and mention that in the funding section that we skipped over because it was a bunch of big numbers, I wanna just mention that essentially the main point of that section is to show that these are really underfunded programs that need a lot more support. So I just wanna mention that. Research has clearly demonstrated that providing young people employment opportunities can reduce youth violence. Effective programs already exist in Chicago, which can help individuals and communities address conflict, reduce harmful behavior, create safe spaces for youth development, and initiate behavior change in youth caught up in dangerous situations. Incarceration itself is a social ill which breaks down families and communities, as well as stripping well-being, resources, possibilities, and hope away from youth. Detention itself is prohibitively expensive. High levels of surveillance and policing in low-income communities of color divert resources away from other forms of social intervention which are more productive and beneficial. Local and state governments and communities are facing financial crises and relying on the criminal legal system to deal with youth crime through arrest and detention. And relying on the criminal legal system to deal with youth crime through arrest and detention is expensive, destructive, impractical, and short-sighted. The core reason most youth in these programs, oh, sorry, I just stepped on Woody, stepped on my dog, scared me. The core reason most youth in these programs are in conflict with the law is unmet basic needs, family crisis, lack of options for recreational and productive activities, inadequate schools, and intense surveillance and criminalization by the state and educational systems. The programs profiled in this report work with youth to address these issues in ways that are cost-effective, nurturing, and oriented toward the future well-being of individuals and communities. Even with these excellent programs in place, youth may still lack resources to overcome structural barriers such as overall lack of government investment in poor communities of color. Restrictive immigration laws and policies, excessive reliance on policing to address an inappropriately broad range of social ills, inadequate opportunities for living wage employment, and militarized public schools, which serve more as a conduit to the cradle to prison pipeline than a pathway to learning, jobs, or further education. Yet, Precious Blood Ministries, Lawndale Christian Legal Center, Circles and Ciphers, New Life Centers of Chicagoland, and Youth Outreach Services all create new options for youth to find adult support, engage in positive activities with other youth, and find a path out of involvement with the criminal legal system and into a better future. These programs are all operating on tiny budgets and a great proportion of volunteer labor, reducing their long-term capacity to create change for the youth they serve. Our society continues to invest heavily in policing, investigation of crimes, court processes, and incarceration. For a fraction of the economic and social costs incurred in those systems, we could invest in providing resources and alternatives for our youth. It is especially important that programs serve as true alternatives to incarceration and not simply as extensions of destructive, punitive systems that placed within communities. People designing and implementing programs must be part of the communities they work in. Deep knowledge and experience with restorative community and transformative justice philosophy and practice are the heart of what make alternative programs work for youth. there are experts in the community who are already showing us how. For questions or concerns about this paper, please contact Michelle Venata and Miriam Kaba, and then there's an email, and there's more information that can be found on the back of this. I'm going to read the appendix really quickly. It's just half a page, but the Cook County Probation Department has alternatives to incarceration as well. Although we attempted to reach them, this program was going through a staffing change during the writing of this report, and we were unable to obtain detailed information. The following information was provided by Katrin Valencia during her last day at the department. The department has sanctioned programs so that instead of being violated and going to court, a young person can do a contract instead of going before a judge. Youth may have the option to do a sanction with programs in the community. If they successfully complete, the probation officer can't violate their probation on those allegations. The department also has pretrial case management for youth who are not going to school but are not yet on probation. They offer a form of peace circles. There are different education and behavior change programs that are sometimes offered, and if youth successfully complete, then the state will not press charges. This includes programs such as Retail Theft School. The program may connect youth with treatment. They may have their own clinical division which provides art therapy or another form of therapy, often with supervised student interns who are working on doctorates in clinical psychology. The program sponsors evening reporting centers, as described earlier in this report, electronic monitoring, and shelter care as alternatives to the juvenile detention center in some cases. Shelter care is a non-secure residential site that is one step less intensive than incarceration. The department offers anger management training, pre-employment training with job skills and resume building, and education advocacy for youth who may have learning issues or have been inappropriately labeled. The department has programs to help students get back to regular school attendance or to begin working on GEDs. Animal therapy is sometimes offered, and programming exists for children and youth via a faith-based consortium as well. Specialized officers work with dually involved kids who are the Department of Children and Family Services due to abuse or neglect by parents or guardians, and have also been labeled by the department as delinquent. There are also mentoring programs. A presiding judge recruits attorneys and mentors for kids on probation. All sanctioned providers have been trained in providing a form of peace circle and may offer victim offender mediation, not meditation. Okay, so we are now going to move on to our conversation aspect of our evening. And I was wondering if anyone here tonight would be interested in reading out our community guidelines for discussion. I'm going to put them in the chat. Sorry, I'm having Zoom fatigue tonight. Here we are. Okay, I've put the guidelines in the chat, and if anyone's feeling like reading them out loud, that would be lovely, and if not, we'll have our team member, Caroline, do that. Do you feel like reading them, Caroline?
Sure.
Much.
Our community guidelines. We agree that any community member that is white or a non-Black person of color will not use the N-word. When referring to or when reading the N-word, the community member will say, quote, N-word. We agree not to blame ourselves or others for the misinformation we have learned, but to accept responsibility for not repeating misinformation after we have learned otherwise. We agree to listen respectfully to each other without interruption. Only one person speaks at a time. However, this does not mean we should ignore problematic statements. We are dedicated to creating a space for calling people in when possible, instead of relying on calling people out. However, both approaches are valid and can be done with care and respect, with the goal of helping each other learn. We acknowledge that we may be at different stages of learning on the content and discussion topics. We agree that no one should be required or expected to speak for their whole race or gender. We can't, even if we wanted to. We hold each other's best interest at heart. We hope everyone has come to the table to learn, grow, and share. We will trust that people are doing the best they can. Let's challenge and encourage each other to do better. Share responsibility for including all voices in the discussion. If you have a tendency to dominate discussions, try taking a step back. If you tend to stay quiet, try challenging yourself to share ideas so others can learn from you. Silence is golden. Sometimes there will be long pauses. Sometimes silence can create space for folks who needs that space to come forward. We agree to not fill silences out of discomfort. We will hold this silence with care and move forward intentionally. We welcome those of you whose minds are bursting with ideas to write them in the chat bar. The facilitators are not experts. They are here to help facilitate the process. They and everyone in the group are here to learn. We also recognize that everyone has an opinion. Opinions, however, are not the same as informed knowledge backed up by research. Depending on the topic and context, both are valid to share, but it's important to know the difference. To engage in deep learning, we will want to learn more toward informed knowledge and gain practice reflecting and speaking thoughtfully on difficult topics. It's okay not to know. Keep in mind that we are still learning and are bound to make mistakes when approaching a complex task or exploring new ideas. Be open to changing your mind and make space for others to do so as well. The facilitators are not moderators. They are not trained to moderate personal grievances. If discussion stops being about the reading and instead breaches into accusations and aggressions, please respect the facilitators switching gears and refocusing on the text. If any of these guidelines are breached, Metabolic team member Emily will reach out to you privately in the chat to provide a reminder. If the guidelines continue to be breached, Emily will provide a verbal call-in. By staying on this Zoom call, you are agreeing to these community guidelines for our discussion period. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. That was so soothing.
Great work.
I'm sleepy tonight, but I'm like,
Thank you.
So thank you all. And I'm going to reiterate the question that Ryan asked before we started reading. And again, just to be fully transparent, if you have any other, like if you don't want to answer these questions, if you want to, for example, just reflect, feel free to take this space to do that. Also feel free if you want to ask a question, this is a perfect time to do that as well. So we're just providing these questions to, you know, spark some conversation. But what are some ways that these alternatives to incarceration have the potential to reshape how we perceive public safety?
I just wanted to say I'm so aggrieved by the author relating the incident of the young man riding on the sidewalk and then supposedly kicking a police officer. I can't help but it 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 really had nothing to do with public safety in terms of him doing a sidewalk. I mean, that's something that could be rendered maybe with a warning, you know, don't do that or whatever it is. But the perception of public safety rings to me like it's a hot topic versed on who you are, black or white. Public safety to some people who are not black may mean no trouble from blacks. And public safety for people of color would be no trouble from the police. So I hate to say that, but a lot of times we're going to have to really go back to the drawing board and make absolutely clear that these so-called public safety laws are for everyone, and includes the definition and the administration of them includes some type of common sense. Public safety is, I always look at those in law like torts, little minor things, not murder, you know. So just wanted to give you my thought on that.
Is it okay to speak like this, just at random? Okay. Well, something I was thinking about was it seems like these organizations and paths to change the way that we view policing at an earlier stage, like to give resources, kind of come down to that and kind of come down to like the funding of these institutions or even the schools themselves. So that's kind of something I was thinking about, was how are schools themselves funded and how does that influence these organizations and the work that they do with the community. And so I can't help but separate kind of the idea of public schools being funded a certain way, the way that charter schools influence that, and even public schools influence that, and the way those are kind of influenced and how they're funded to better serve those communities. And in what ways do the choices that we make, sending kids to those schools, or how that can kind of have a trickle down effect in the idea of safety. Yeah.
We'll read the next question as well. Just 1 second. What do we gain from a system that prioritizes self-growth over punishment, and what do we lose? I'll throw that in the chat right now as well.
Hi. I think very generally we would gain in a system that prioritizes self-growth as people reaching their, living their best lives and reaching their best potential. And what we lose is what we, is that I think what we have now is the opposite. So what we lose is people living to their getting to their best selves, and that in general, that's the way I see it.
I think there was something very dehumanizing about the strict adherence. Actually, it wasn't even adherence to the letter of the law. It was taking it way, way, way beyond what the law usually requires. And what we have to gain, I think, is not just a sense of the humanity of the person that is supposedly the perpetrator, but our own humanity as well. We can't live in a society that is as cruel as was described in some of this. Just can't keep doing it.
I think we lose a sense of zero-sum thinking. Like when we take on these systems of self-growth, it's like we can all kind of rise up together, and there isn't, my win isn't someone else's loss, and someone else's loss isn't my own victory.
That was so excellent, Aman. You said somebody's loss is somebody else's victory. I'm paraphrasing what you said. I think that's so powerful because it seems that rather than we're in it for justice, it's almost like the world is built on revenge. And every person who's wronged, they are taking the brunt of every person that looks like them wrong. Nothing's taken case by case. Nobody has a clean slate. Every problem in society is presented as this again, rather than what's going on. And it's so cruel. And yes, you can see that where somebody's loss of rights is a victory for somebody who feels that they only have their own rights and that's nobody else's. So thank you for putting that on.
I'm going to ask the next question. How can we reorient public perspectives of youth in conflict with the law in order to support these alternatives and make them more readily accessible? I was thinking about the humanizing aspect of learning about kind of how petty some crimes really are. Like, you know, the bike example really sticks with me. And just thinking about the ways that there really is a vicious cycle of getting really caught in a web of this system of injustice, for lack of a better term. And I think that something that we can do to reshape that narrative obviously has to do with like trying to humanize these experiences, because so often, at least in my life, growing up and, you know, being in my 20s, I feel like it's only due to the work that I've done and due to the like interest that I have in educating myself and the interest of like my peers that I've come to learn that people who are criminalized are just people who are criminalized, you know, and that there's obviously people who are, you know, unwell and who need support and who can be a danger to other people. But there's also the other side of things, which is just like a system that criminalizes people for living their lives and for having really not a lot of alternatives to, you know, like that example of like someone getting caught with marijuana or another drug, but they're just literally selling the drug to try to make a living. And it's not like then they're charged as addicts, but a lot of people don't actually have an addiction in this case. It's just like some kind of alternative. So yeah, I've just been thinking that question of like, how do we reorient this perspective of youth caught in conflict with the law is like, I think that it does in large part rely on education and trying to understand where and why this even happens in the first place.
These programs to me feel so hopeful because I feel like it is creating a safety net that we all need at a certain age, that some people don't have the luxury of having that, like just that extra chance to not just get crushed by and be on a path. It's like you're given another, we all need that. We all need that extra safety net. And I love the story about at least having a group be able to support the person on the sidewalk. That it just, that path was just, it could have ended up so bad, but having a group that was there to support him, that's, I wish, I mean, I'm hoping and praying that there are more of these type of organizations to make sure that we all have that protection in place.
Yeah, again, I can't think of how the perception not would matter, but these like these organizations, how they're getting their funding, how they're being funded, how is like the very geography of like zip codes being addressed to some degree. I'm not sure if that's sidetracking the question, but I don't know, just like the morality of what gets funded and what doesn't is something to think about.
I had a couple of thoughts that I'd like to share, if that's okay. From all of the comments, I've been thinking about the idea of rehabilitation and restorative justice versus the idea of punishment. Is one kind of dichotomy I have in my brain. And then the other dichotomy that I have is, you know, in medicine, sometimes I feel the field of medicine, Western medicine, we often treat the symptom rather than the cause of the injury or what might be the cause of pain or problem. And I think that's another thing I'm thinking about in this conversation is how can we, like you're saying, Maya, support systems that examine injury to begin with in terms of our society, rather than symptoms of the wound, so to speak.
I was wanting to ask this next question, but also feel free, again, like if you have just general thoughts or if you want to answer past questions, that's totally fine too. What concepts resonated with you the most from these readings or this reading? And what would you like to try to understand more?
Hi. I think what resonated most, and a bit it's been touched on and what other people have mentioned, is that this, what we just read today, talks about systems that individual organizations have put into place that are not well funded, but they've found, they've seen the need, and they've gone and put together these systems that work. And that's what resonates with me, is that there are ways to help people, that these systems exist, that each of these organizations all over the world, all over our country, we all seem to be stuck with having to reinvent the wheel each time. And so it resonates with me as both hopeful and also still worried, because there are systems, there are models for things that work. And something that I think was just mentioned was, oh, now I'm losing my train of thought. I'm sorry that happens. But so that's what resonates with me, is that we are seeing ways to help people. We have to change so that people not so much don't need the help, make the society better so the disenfranchised are no longer disenfranchised. And that's a whole other story. But how do we connect each other so that we all have the tools to, when we see this sort of need, how we can put it into place? So that's something that's resonating with me.
Something that resonated with me, and maybe less that it resonated with me so much as that I feel that this reading highlighted for me, was that there are alternatives to incarceration that are actually more cost effective. And the reason that I think this is important is that we live in a system, obviously, that values capital. And although I understand from the work that we've done during these readings that the prison industrial complex actually profits, provides profit for the US, which is why it's so ginormous. But it is interesting to think about how they were saying, for example, their Friday night baseball games literally decreased crime on that night. And so I just think about like how they're, it's not like rocket science, but like just having alternative options in times that are statistically higher risk for people to get involved with criminal activity, that's not that challenging. That's a possibility. So that's kind of what stuck with me. One of the things.
I think alongside that, something that resonated with me was the idea of criminality and how laws can serve different populations' version of this country. So the example of the guy riding his bike and how that put him in a situation that was detracting and taking away his future, essentially, just for a law that was not very, it's like a misdemeanor or whatever it was. But I think of like taillights, I think of all these different little ways that really can ruin somebody's life who isn't of a certain race or economic class.
One of the concepts that kind of stuck with me, and I forget which organization talked about this, but for each individual defining their own definition of personal success, I think that's, you know, something that should be thought of in uh, juvenile detention centers, but also just in general with people. But I think that's a really awesome thing to talk about with people of like defining your own success. Your own success may be very different from someone else's because you have very different backgrounds or very different things or very different interests. So I think that's an awesome thing or mentality to move forward.
Well, if y'all feel like transitioning into our show and tell, feel free to say if you don't want to transition, if there's anyone who wants to add any more to this discussion. But for folks who feel like showing what they've been working on tonight, I'd love to see, and I know other community members would love to see, so you can unmute yourself and
Just want to say good night to everyone, and thank you very, very much.
Hey, Shakura, it's great to seeing you.
Good night, Shakura.
You too.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye-bye, sweetie.
Good to see you. Bye.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Thanks
night,
for
Lily.
joining.
Good to see you.
Great to be with you all.
Bye.
Just before I go, I'm going to show you, this is what I've been doing. Adding
Oh,
some California poppies
Will
in
you
the
raise
background
raise
there.
it up?
Lift it up higher, Joan.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Oh,
Great, Joan.
thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for reading.
My
Thanks for being-
privilege.
We have a couple kids who want to share some things. One question and one embroidery.
Wow.
Where,
Hey, keep it up. We gotta pin your video.
wow.
So that's the oyster
Hi.
mushroom.
Wow.
That looks great.
Awesome work.
Ask your question.
I don't see it.
Desmond is a little shy, but they wanted to ask about the hybrid object and what exactly that is going to be. They were thinking that maybe people would want to embroider the questions.
Hey.
Or embroider the book. Wow. Those are great ideas. Wow, what great ideas.
Great ideas.
Questions and the words. Wow.
Can you embroider the book too? Was that the last?
Yeah. Yeah, the questions and the book. What a beautiful idea.
I love that idea. Thank you so much.
Woo.
You go, you do it. Hi, everybody. It's Millie and Lauren. We wanted to show and tell we harvested, and there's about, I think there's like 50 pounds of beautiful corn. But look at the colors.
Oh my
They're
God.
so incredible.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
Unbelievable.
That was from our own little field there? That's amazing.
That's from here.
Wow.
That's incredible, guys.
Yeah, this is just like a fraction of it, you guys. And I think it's about 50 pounds.
God, it's just gorgeous.
Wow.
Those colors.
The colors
Beautiful.
are amazing.
Yeah,
Totally
just
beautiful.
jewels.
Thanks for reading.
You're very welcome.
It's amazing.
Harvesting corn.
Yeah, they look so beautiful in that basket too.
It's just an artwork.
So just to add to that, these are native seeds. These are gifts from the Hopi to us, and they're planted here at the moon, right by the LA River. And we planted. This is five months of growth. So yeah, amazing, and just an infinite variety of colors and shapes here.
Yeah.
But we wanted to do it tonight while we listened to the reading. So it was a wonderful thing to do with our hands, and listen. It was I was able to listen in a much more deep way than when I've been doing needlepoint and sitting still. So that was a good experience. Thank you so much for the reading.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
So beautiful.
So I completed something during the. I'll show you.
Wow.
Wait, I completed this.
Wow. Yum.
Dinner.
Yum.
Looks great.
Is it sourdough?
Yeah.
Nice. Anissa, how's your embroidery going?
I did, yeah, I switched over finally. The onion is done, so I did start on my moth. I'm going from the body first, and then like fill in all that.
Wow.
Lift it up again, Anissa. Beautiful.
Wow. Beautiful.
Very cool.
That's beautiful, Anissa.
Thank you.
Cool.
It's just the start.
It's great.
Armand, it was so nice to have you.
Great to see you, Armand.
Yes.
We miss you.
We're going for a ride with Phil. Let's.
Yeah. Where are you taking us?
Phil's drinking and driving.
Oh hey, I'm looking for a park. I just found a parking spot.
Right.
Oh, that's exciting.
Like,
I've been circling
so
the
you
block
were
here.
there.
Where are you taking us?
Yeah, where are you going, Phil?
We're in Mid City right here.
Woo!
Right, we got the Faithful Laundromat just to my left, and next to that there's a fine panaderia with very sweet horchata that I might visit.
Oh yeah.
It feels so good to be in Mid City with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wait.
totally. For real.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh yeah. Happy to take you around in my cup holder.
Yeah.
Driving
That was
with
great, you
Bill.
guys.
Living the big life out here Friday night.
Woo! It's the most I've ever done in a long time. At least LA. Really delicious soup tonight.
Olan, what are you working on? What do you have?
I'm still working on the horseweed, which has like a million parts.
Wow. Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
can't pin your video anymore. I don't know why. That looks amazing. I want to see it up close, but I can't.
Colors are so much better in person.
That looks
this.
awesome.
Thank you. It's like I've developed this amazing patience.
It's so beautiful. I wish I could see it.
I know, it's just like
I just can't pin the video.
I love that. I know. I don't know why I can't pin anymore.
I
Something
can't
happened.
pin anymore either. I've lost.
Somebody changed a setting for us, I think.
Yeah, I have lost the privilege of pinning. I had to let things go.
Nothing's been changed. Try again. I'm not sure why you wouldn't be able to.
Well,
It's not showing up at all.
No, it only says chat. It only gives me the option of chatting.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's the updates that have been happening.
Oh, it
Maybe
was-
that's the
I was
setting.
pinning like crazy earlier. I was pinning when people were talking. I don't know. It all of a sudden.
All of a sudden, the rug comes out from under us.
Yeah, and I have no ability to pin.
No more pinning ability.
That's so strange.
Yeah, it's true. Oh wait, now we can. It's back.
Yeah, it came back.
Is it back?
Oh,
Is
it
it back?
Okay,
There.
okay, wait, okay. Whoa.
Pin me.
That's beautiful. Oh my God.
Look at the multi-tone greens and pinks.
There's so many greens in here. I just had to make some decisions.
That
so
is
there wouldn't
so
be a
beautiful.
million greens. Thank you. Yeah, I'm starting to just love embroidery. I used to not be good at it, therefore I didn't like it.
You're good.
It's beautiful.
There's something about just sitting and listening, and there's time to take a stitch out if it went wrong and then put it back smoother. You know, it's like something slows down on the outside. It's great.
It's so cool.
Who else has show and tell now that we have the ability to pin again?
Yeah, let's see what you guys got.
Okay, wait, let me pin you.
Let me pin. I'm coming in for the pin.
Wow. Wow.
What are you making?
Is that knitting? Is it or lace?
It's here. I'll show you a little up close.
Wow.
What is it?
Yarn. It's a nice cotton yarn.
Yeah, nice texture.
Wait, you're making a bag, did you say?
I'm making a bag. Yes. So I'm
That
gonna
is so nice.
a simple like fold over, and then a nice strap. But this yarn is really lovely. I ordered it online from the company Pearl Soho.
Okay.
Highly recommend. And it does like fold over. I don't know if you can see, but like the lip has a nice texture. So
Yeah, it looks great.
thank you. It has a good coffee stain now too, thanks to courtesy of Ryan.
I didn't even.
That's authentic right there.
Tie dye.
Yeah, in the country now. Jen, I didn't see yours earlier because I could not pin.
Okay, well, I'm working on two. Tonight I started working on the mallow.
Oh, the mallow. I remember the mallow. Got all those different edges. Yeah. Well, this is a different mallow than my mallow. It's a different drawing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think there might be two versions, and then the other one that I'm switching back and forth is the other one.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
That's so
wow. Luscious.
Look at that. Wow.
Beautiful.
Wow. Nice.
Put it back again. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can you back the Wowie Zowie one? Wow.
That's unbelievable.
Ready.
Laureate.
Yeah, so
it's crazy.
Cindy's daughter's the one that drew it originally, and we turned it into a screen and printed it at the studio. And I started embroidering it, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago, and then I put it down. And then we started this. I thought, oh, I've got to run the studio and get it and start working on that as well.
Let's see yours, Cindy.
Oh my gosh, that's so.
Hold it up, hold it up.
You're muted.
My
there you are.
Oh, you can turn your background off?
You don't have to.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very
You made a whole
nice.
shoreline. You made the shoreline around the
Really
continent.
That's amazing.
That's great.
Have a good evening, you guys. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks for the corn show.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Show.
Bye. Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Good evening, you guys.
Bye, you guys. Thank you.
Good night. See you later.
Bye.
Take
Thank
a
you.
drive. Thank you, guys. Have a good evening. Good weekend.
Thanks, you too. We'll see y'all next week.
Thank you.
Bye, Roxanne.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.
Night.